Welcome to Compliance Uncomplicated, an interview series dedicated to simplifying the unnecessarily complex world of risk and compliance. Hosted by Drata experts, each episode will tell a new story about high-growth startups and other brands that are building compliance pathways towards a culture of security. Every business, industry, and team has unique challenges when it comes to building trust. And for many startups, compliance is one of the first stepping stones towards that pathway. In each episode, we'll hear from founders, visionaries, and those tasked with building a foundation of trust for their brand. It's time to unravel the jargon and abbreviations and uncomplicate compliance.
All right, we got a great panel coming up, Q&A, so get interactive. It is led by the one and only Senior Director, Head of GRC at Dropbox, Tolga Erbay. And joining him from Class, Jonas Hirschfield. From D-Scope, Omar Cohen. From Remetic, Metin Kortak. And from the hometown, Drata. I love you, Joe.
Great, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
My name's Tolga. I lead GRC at Dropbox, and I'm going to moderate this panel. One thing to note is that this is actually a live episode of Drata's Compliance Uncomplicated podcast. So why don't we kick it off? One of the themes of this day here at Drataverse is to accelerate. And one of the things that our esteemed panelists have here is experience in scaling security risk and compliance programs. And so I want to jump right in with advice. Any advice you can give to folks out there, Drata customers, people that are trying to scale at startups, how to sort of build and scale quickly security risk and compliance programs. Jonas, you want to kind of kick us off with that?
Sure, absolutely. Get out of Excel. You are not going to build a modern, holistic security program if you're running it from Excel. And it's one of the things that I first learned coming to a startup company. They were trying to manage a security program out of Excel. And the amount of time that I was watching being spent into that, we weren't working on the big rocks. Right? The second thing I would say is enable sales. It's 2023. Security is in the sales cycle on almost every deal. So for us, quick things that we rolled out were a trust center, client-facing security packs, making content available to our sales for self-service and to our clients, downloading SOC reports, downloading pen tests. Again, a client-facing security pack that pretty much would answer a lot of the questions that we were getting in the surveys, right? So we get these surveys. There's only so many ways that you can ask security questions, so we flipped it and created client-facing security packs. I would say right-sized the security program to where the business is and the needs of the business. I use a word, and my team hates when I use it, but I use it for a reason, MVP. Nail the basics, build a foundation, then accelerate. And then the fourth one, I would say, make good bets. And for us, Drata is a new bet, but we feel it's a really good bet.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think on the compliance side, like you mentioned, the automation is a big piece. On the security part, what's a little bit less covered is, and what I've seen is the need to, what you said, nail the fundamentals. Right? Security is hard, but it's really hard if you don't have the breadth of each of the fundamental pillars necessary. And so just getting that foundational bit across all the elements of security, I think is kind of really key.
Decide on your kind of security platform or program early on. So even if you're a startup or a larger company, at some point, you're going to have to work through the compliance framework. So by deciding which one fits your market, whether it's European, US, or whatever framework you're choosing to use, that would really help you build a security program for then to be the baseline for the rest of the security group. Drata is great in a way to help you better understand the controls and requirements, and then obviously through automation makes that process really quick. Because, like you said, Jonas, it's about accelerating the business, it's enabling the business, and even at some point it becomes a business enabler to be compliant at specific frameworks that your customers need. So I find that really helpful.
And how would you say, when companies are trying to scale very fast, but there are a million frameworks out there. I've heard this in some of the previous sessions as well, but how would you sort of try to prioritize the frameworks and the need to tackle 10 of them immediately across all these areas in the world and these industries versus just trying to build a security program? I'm interested in sort of the balance there.
So it really depends on the market and the type of company. I feel the biggest two are ISO 27 and SOC 2. SOC 2 is mostly for the US, ISO is for Europe and I guess the rest of the world. And again, depending on your market of the company, or whether if you're not a software provider, if you're just a standard enterprise, it helps structure the whole security program. And from there, you can start diving deeper into the other frameworks that are relevant for your business. At the end of the day, it's meant to enable your security program and drive your business forward. So deciding on one of these two in the beginning is mostly a market decision or a marketing decision. And from there, as a compliance officer, you decide where else you want to improve or highlight the areas you want to excel at.
Yeah, I found in scaling, right, starting with the most globally accepted, your ISO 27001, your SOC 2, to at least get your foot in the door, as a lot of people have said here, right, before picking off a region-specific or an industry-specific standard. Unless you're in a business that is already very specific, right? If you're in healthcare, you can just start with HIPAA. It's okay, right? But it depends on that piece. But broadly, for scale purposes, the most widely accepted, the most globally known is kind of where I found them. It's easiest to start, right?
We had a little bit of a sort of creative way of getting started because we needed to get started fast. Very similar to Drata's story, where Drata wanted to achieve SOC, then launch. So very similar, we needed a fast method. We went after one of the SOC trust security principle we went after. There's 5 principles, but we picked one, and we picked the 90-day observation period, which as a small startup company, it allowed for, I guess, a little less of a audit scope. But I will say something that was very interesting. In that year, no customer questioned that we actually have a 90-day observation period. Our goal now with Drata and continuous compliance is to be in constant audit, or underneath constant observation. But as a shortcut, 90-day observation periods, if your industry potentially may not challenge it, can help you get a SOC.
Yeah, to get a type 2 report to your customers as quickly as possible.
Quickly as possible.
I mean, I think an audit firm, that's probably the minimum period they do, but you can do that, right? And yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, you touched on it, and it's actually the next question, is around continuous compliance. So continuous compliance has been an idea for a very long time. I think I've heard people speak about it for 15 years now. But only recently with tools like Drata and others is it seemingly possible as something to achieve. And so I'm curious a bit about your thoughts on continuous compliance, both from a, is this realistic standpoint in terms of improving your security program, but then also on the second side of it being, are customers able to sort of consume continuous compliance and use continuous compliance for that kind of ongoing assurance. So yeah, if either one, you want to take that one,
Yeah, so I've been in this field for more than a decade, so I'm definitely appreciating that we have that available now. For me, like from the internal side of compliance and having a team that focuses on compliance every day, just having that visibility is really key because we can focus on some of the gaps related to security. We can react to it like in a proactive way versus like waiting until, we've done an audit and we're kind of trying to fix things that are kind of after the time period that we really needed to address it. So kind of getting ahead of it, understanding it and prioritizing it based on the information we're seeing and having it all visible to us in one sort of dashboard is very, very helpful. On the other side of it, just being transparent and providing that to our customers or prospects, providing where we stand, like what our compliance posture is, what our security posture is, I appreciate it when I see other clients provide that to me, and just being transparent and providing that to our clients, I think it's been really beneficial. Like they can quickly go to our trust center, they can quickly see what we are providing, they can access information, they can they can look at frequently asked questions. There's a lot of information that's available to them, and from the compliance side, I like to see transparency. I appreciate when others do that for us, and I like to provide that back to them as well. So I feel like it's going to continue to be more transparent, and I think that's kind of where we're evolving.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges I've seen is that consumption of the continuous compliance by like the third-party risk manager or the person doing third-party risk, right? Like they have the time to check it when you enter a contract. When is the next time they're going to check it? How are they going to do it? In a SOC 2, you get it once a year, or maybe if you're really lucky, once every 90 days. But sort of that continuous feed of information, like how can people best consume that is, I think, kind of the next question. I don't know if you have any ideas there. This is a new thing for all of us to kind of work with continuous compliance.
I think it's definitely something that we should strive for. So I'm actually relatively new to managing compliance. I did security incident response for about 15 years before moving into a CISO role. And in my previous life, monitoring our security controls was a day-to-day work. Think of it like a SOC. So having Drata or whatever product make sure that firewalls are in place, data is encrypted, and not just the high-level kind of yearly evidence that we do background checks and we have a privacy policy, great, but the continuous compliance actually helps me manage my security program for the company and the product day to day. So it's actually not just a compliance or security compliance control, it's a security control, right? It helps me manage the information security for the company and for our infrastructure day to day.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting, right? Because you're shifting the frame of compliance as the annual audit or the 6-month audit and check to actually being the foundation of like SecOps, right? Of like security and your day-to-day work in security.
Exactly. If something is wrong with our WAF for our application, I want to know about it immediately, not at the next security audit.
Yeah.
Right? So I find that super useful.
Awesome. I do want to say, like, it's not really just the best practice anymore when it comes to continuous monitoring, because when we're going through audits like FedRAMP, ISO 27001, like now it's actually a requirement. So like we're not just doing it because like now it is available to us, but then in the past, and I'm sure you have experience with that, is we have to like check a lot of the things manually, like review your GitHub repositories every day, make sure they're actually protected, check your policies, check your AWS assets, make sure that they're also all protected and compliant with the compliance frameworks. So I think like just having systems like Drata, it's more automated, so like we get notified immediately, and then like that's saving us a lot of time, because in the past there used to be just like a full team just responsible for monitoring, and like that was their entire job. So I think like with Drata, we're making it a lot more efficient.
Yeah.
That's why I'm also super excited about the Trust Center announcement today, because being able to actually promote and share that information with my customers and the world is actually kind of a brave move from a security management perspective, being able to say, yes, you're welcome to check my controls every day, and I'm bound to keeping them on check. So the whole idea is, I think, super helpful to promoting compliance for the industry in general.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned a brave move. I think it is a brave move, right? And you mentioned all about the transparency of it, right? You know, in compliance, things happen. You have findings, you have exceptions, things break, controls break, someone forgets to do something, right? And in a continuous compliance world, that little green light might turn red, and then that's going to be immediately sort of visible to customers if you choose to do that, right? And so that is a brave world, right, about transparency and about not being perfect all the time. So I am curious what your thoughts are there about sort of navigating that, because in my experience, when you review a SOC 2, the first thing you do is you Control F for a finding, and then you kind of pounce on that finding. But in a continuous compliance mode, that's going to pop up anytime, immediately, right? So I am curious from anyone who wants to chime in here, just about how to manage that aspect of this.
I would say, just if there is a finding or an issue, be very open and honest and communicate like what exactly was the issue and how did you fix it. I mean, if there is a mistake, that happens, but at least be transparent in how you were resolving it, so you're still building that trust, that open line of communication, so that they feel that you have addressed it, and these are the steps that you've taken to prevent it from happening in the future.
Yeah. I think the ability to be able to delegate controls throughout the organization. It was very interesting. My head of IT yesterday, because with Drata now every day becoming more and more operationalized, we're getting real-time alerts. And the questions are, is someone looking at this, right? So when you have these controls, understanding who is accountable for that control, so that if a control does turn red, that those individuals are responsible. Because by signing up for continuous, you're right, you're publishing to maybe even your customer base, to your auditors.
Yeah, it's very brave, like I said.
The method that we've sort of managed our security programs today, it could be once a year, right? And data, slow sending back and forth of data, and it's very controlled, and you invite an auditor to a Zoom meeting to show controls, but with continuous, you really have to up your game as a organization.
Yeah, it really raises the bar.
It raises the
bar
bar.
On not just a compliance team or a security team, but anybody owning or operating a control at your organization.
And I think it does two things. One, there's a saying that and I'm not sure if this is, if others would feel this, but I believe that you can achieve a SOC and not be secure. And, but by going into and pushing your organization to do continuous, not only are you raising the bar of expanding your compliance, but you're also raising the bar of the company.
Yeah.
Right? And I'll give myself as an example. We started with a 90-day observation period, so that means for 9 months of the year, I didn't have to follow process, right? But now I'm pushing the entire company to be compliant 365.
Yeah, I think that kind of goes to what we were just saying, which is continuous compliance is moving it away from the old model of compliance, which may not correlate to security, to it's SecOps, right? It's security. It's like operations every day and how things are working or not working, right?
As a service provider, we have like a status page that shows our service availability, and an outage is something our customers get notified about immediately. I assume they will want to get notified as well for any security in compliance as well, because it impacts the service that we provide as well. So having that, I think about it just the same as an SLA for a service, same thing for compliance. Because if for a week we didn't have any security controls, it may not show up on an audit because there were no findings, but customers would still want to know about it. So having that continuous and having those alerts, I think, is a smart way to move. Because one of the things I hate reading in reports is when on the findings they say it was skipped because nothing was observed during the audit period.
Yes.
And it's like, that's very disappointing, because I want to see how you guys handle such an incident or an occurrence of something, because it shows me how the organization is handling that, not just the fact that they have a policy, but that they're able to execute on it. Mm-hmm. So having that live continuous monitoring forces you to react and monitor and be active. So I find that's very useful.
Yeah. Super interesting, right? It is definitely a brave new world, but I think it's going to be great in shrinking that gap between compliance and security and providing customers more transparency. So yeah, here we all go. Cool. So at this point, we're a little bit past halfway through. I want to open it up to the floor.
Brave first.
I was wondering, as the threat landscape kind of continues to grow and develop, how do you guys recommend staying on top of emerging threats and kind of the new trends that we're seeing among cyber attacks?
I think really just doing a lot of, there's information out there, like when new compliance frameworks are released, when there's new versions of vulnerability patches are released, all of that information is out there. It's just about really getting it on a regular basis. What I do with my clients just to make sure that we're being always up to date with these frameworks is that we will subscribe to some mailing lists so that people get emails regularly letting us know if there's a critical vulnerability. There's literally a vulnerability that we see on Windows devices every month. It just happens a lot, and then we have to be aware of those vulnerabilities. So really subscribing those newsletters, utilizing systems like intrusion detection systems, or even using systems like Drata can help you, because we know that when new frameworks are released or new amendments are made to those frameworks, these systems will be updated, and then we will identify those controls and regularly remediate them.
I think my approach to that is maybe slightly different, because instead of being worried of all the threats that might come up every other day, I'm thinking backwards at what does my security program look like, and what is the vectors of attack, or where am I weakest, is where I should put most of my attention. So where a new publication comes out or something like that, I can better understand how it impacts me. So understanding your exposure, both from a business front and from a technological standpoint, helps you kind of prepare for that. And what I like about the custom frameworks in Drata is I'm able to kind of build my own little secret framework of how I manage my security program, so I can identify kind of weaknesses.
One thing I typically advise here is, again, go back to the security foundation. So no matter what the emerging threat is, your security foundations are the way through it, right? How are you doing, patch management? How are you doing vulnerabilities? How are you doing incident response? Have you done a tabletop exercise for breach response? Regardless of what the threat is, the answer is going to come through the kind of exercise of the fundamentals. So,
I think one more to add to that is, I think I heard something earlier today say that no security organization is bulletproof. It's relentless. Every day there's something different. Every day we see some new article. I can't count how many free credit monitoring services I've received emails, because major companies that I work with, my data has been sort of compromised. So I think for us, what we are doing is focusing on sort of the vectors that are impactful for us and where we believe our sort of our weaker spots are, and focus efforts on hardening those tools, understanding the applications that we have in your environment. SaaS apps galore. There are SaaS apps everywhere, and how many of them are considered tier 1 applications? And did you know that? And do you know what data is in those applications? And what are your relationships with those vendors so that you get communicated? There are many big vendors out there that we all use, and hoping that, and I hate, because hope is not a strategy, but if they are compromised, how are they communicating to you? What channels of communication do you have? Because now you're downstream in their data path, and there's been some very large companies that we all rely on that have security. So again, building good inventory, flagging them as tier 1, what kind of data was in there.
The good example I like in that area for emerging threats is legacy kind of devices. We're still a young startup, so we don't really have any legacy, but working for larger companies in the past, thinking about how we're going to patch legacy systems that are unpatchable, I think is not the right approach, instead of thinking about what is the threat vector, right? So maybe this emerging new threat is completely irrelevant because of the way the application is being accessed, or that legacy system is being accessed. Yeah. And again, going back to the security program, having those fundamentals in place really helps structure everything else. Yeah. So it goes back to your earlier comment of choosing the right framework. It's relevant to choosing the security program of your company.
Yeah, great. Cool.
Thank you everyone for being as part of the panel. I do a lot of work in SOC reporting and ISO certifications, and I just wanted to get some input from you guys. Curious on some of the things that you value in a provider or a vendor who's helping you meet those compliance goals.
Transparency.
Yeah.
I think that's, and someone said on stage before, like just being clear and honest. If I need to dig through all sorts of hoops to get your reports or get your answers on things, I may not choose you as a vendor, right? When I have business stakeholders internally trying to work with a new vendor, a new startup, or a new provider, I work with them to understand, again, what are they providing us, what risks are they exposing us to, and how easy it is for me to understand the exposure. So I'm excited also to one of the announcements today with the vendor management. Being able to just look up a vendor and see all those details would be super useful. So transparency is key for me.
Yeah, we conduct vendor assessments for our clients every day, and one of the red flags that I see is, like, let's say I'm assessing a vendor, I go to their website, and then there's no information about like what they do from a security standpoint. That's normally a red flag to me, because I'm just like, they probably don't have any certificates, they don't have any security reports. The thing with the trust page is, like, sometimes, like, I've been seeing that a lot more recently with majority of the vendors, is that they will have a trust page, and then when I access that, I can see what they're compliant with, I can see their terms of use, privacy policies, and on top of that, I can even like request access to their documents. Now, that reduces the amount of time I spend on that vendor assessments to almost minutes, when it used to take me a couple of weeks, because I have to find out who to contact, I need to get the information from them, sign the NDAs, and then trust page is, I think, going to really put that and make it very efficient.
It makes me think of the SVCI panel that was here before, talking about the sales cycle, keeping it short. As a security officer, this is part of my sales cycle, right? If I want to use you as a vendor, I need to clear you from security compliance. So making that information accessible to me is going to help the sales cycle on your end with the business owner on my company.
That's how we build trust, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Do we have one more? Looks like we do. Or we got a couple?
Hi. So I have a question about how, turning this kind of around, it's been about compliance and trust and visibility. How do you get out of a compliance-driven security program and innovate to a security program?
I tell this to my clients all the time, just because you're compliant doesn't mean that you're secure. Like, that's the number one thing. Like, I think a lot of people want to do that as a checkbox, but just like outside from that compliance realm, like we have to go above and beyond. If you actually want to be secure, we need to implement controls and policies that may not just be required by the compliance frameworks. Like with our clients, sometimes we implement very strict rules about like who can access their systems, and then we restrict it based on the devices. We need to make sure that like only company-issued laptops can access the systems, and like that may seem pretty strict. It's not really required by majority of the compliance frameworks, but it creates a very good baseline to start a good security program.
We have time for one more question.
Hi. I'm interested in the panel's perspective on fourth-party risks and managing fourth-party risks or sub-processors and vendors of your vendors, and how you think about that and how you approach it.
So the question here is about fourth-party risk, so the vendors of your vendors. I think this is a super interesting question.
I think it connects to the announcement today with the third-party assessment. That continuous assessment of the third-party vendors is critical, because there are lots of products out there that do external surface analysis and things like that, but it's more about the process of how they do it, because having a security policy doesn't really mean you're compliant. It's about acting on it. And even if that vendors can go through SOC 2 saying like, our security policies dictates that you don't have to have any security software on your laptop, and we don't do any access controls at all. That's our policy, and we abide by it. It doesn't mean you're secure, but you're still compliant. So going through the details and better understanding the third-party vendors, how their policy works, how it's implemented, is super helpful, but it's super cumbersome as well to deep dive into all of these policies and understand it. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the Drata brings in that space as well.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's your third party risk management program needs to be part of your vendor risk assessment, right?
Right.
And you can really only rely on what you can see of their program specifically more than their, dozens of sub-processors they might have, right? Well, that's it. I just want to thank the panelists again, and thank you all for coming. And we're looking forward to the keynotes later today, and definitely Jerry Rice. So stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Compliance Uncomplicated, a Drata podcast. To learn more about the series, go to drata.com/uncomplicated. Discuss this episode on our community secured at community.drata.com or subscribe to our newsletter, Trusted, to stay up to date on the latest episodes.